Hello. So I'm going to do something a little bit different with this one. If you've watched any of the videos that I have made up until this point, mostly what I'm talking about is my review of things, where I watch something or I play something and I talk about it. But this one is kind of my own analysis that streams multiple things and so I'm going to be talking about the concept of control as viewed through three characters: Eren Yeager from Attack on Titan, Makima from Chainsaw Man, and Odin from God of War Ragnarok. So I'm going to be spoiling all three of those. So if you would like to not be spoiled, for Chainsaw Man, I'm only spoiling up to part one, just because part one was all that was out when I wrote this. So I'm going to be talking about all those in relation to the concept of control. So a little bit more analytical here today. Okay, so Eren, Odin, and Makima represent control in three distinct forms. Eren has control that is unwillingly given to him. Odin desperately seeks control, and Makima is born with control and knows nothing else. I will go into more depth into all these points later. Eren's willingness towards control could be debated because of his future sight. However, if we are looking at it chronologically for the sake of argument, I will say that Eren, as a 10-year-old, did not want that control, mostly because he didn't know that was an option, but that's different. Odin has the control that he desperately seeks within his sight, but he struggles to grasp it. Makima is the embodiment of control itself, even though all three of these characters come at the concept of control very differently. The end result for all three of them is the same: isolation, loneliness, and loss. Okay, so Makima is different than Eren and Odin because she is the embodiment of control. She is the control devil. It was not a choice that she made, but instead something that has defined her entire existence. She is complete, total, and only control. Makima is barely a person who exists outside the concept of control. We see glimpses of a person who exists on her own in rare glimpses. Makima on the train saying she's intimidated by her bosses, her crying to a movie with Denji, her actual enjoyment of bad movies, her desire to be free of the burden of control. Those are all there. But they are all subtle notes of a person who exists outside of control. There really isn't a whole lot to say about how control looks for Makima because she just is control itself. There isn't more that I could say since she speaks so well for herself. I love and hate her. I love her as a villain, but Denji is my son, so her cruelty to him just makes me hate her. But I love how her control ultimately backfires because it is not as all-encompassing as she thinks. That by giving Denji a found family and taking them away, she obviously devastates him, but she also shows Denji that he is capable of loving and being loved, and that by keeping him close, she keeps her control, but also allows Denji to clock her weaknesses, which leads to her death. I love Chainsaw Man. Watch Chainsaw Man if you haven't. But she is the embodiment of the fear of control. So that she is the embodiment of control. Okay, so I'll be providing a bit of background on Attack on Titan so that everyone can kind of understand my argument. And I think that Eren's approach to control is a little bit more complicated than Makima's. So the basic story of Attack on Titan is that when Eren is 10 years old, his dad injects him with Titan serum, giving him the ability to shift into the Attack Titan and the Founding Titan. Just at that point, he gets more Titans later. But Eren doesn't realize he has this ability until he's 15. Then he realizes that he has this ability where he can access the memories of all other holders of the Attack and Founding Titans and can influence the past and future. This is an immensely powerful ability and one that causes Eren to isolate himself from his friends and ultimately makes him decide to kill 80% of the world's population to save his friends, as him and every person he has ever met was racially targeted to live on this isolated island because they are the only race that can turn into Titans. However, the show shows us that people of Eren's race, Eldians, exist all over the world and are victims themselves of the other race, Marleyans. Marleyans hate Eldians for being able to turn into Titans. However, they force them to turn into Titans so that they can win wars. The show takes great efforts to show the audience that this conflict is not black and white and that the oppression of Eldians is deeply systemic, which makes Eren's entirely not knee-jerk 4-year research decision that they still deserve to die pretty fucked up. Aaron is given this Titan shifting ability from his father because his father has run out of time and has to pass down the 2 Titans that he has, because every Titan shifter can only live for 13 years after they are given the ability to turn into Titans. So Aaron did not have any desire to process this ability at this time. However, once he realizes that he has this ability, it becomes a burden immediately, but one that at every junction, every crossing, he chooses to keep. Also, at every major decision point, Aaron becomes increasingly more and more selfish. Aaron realizes that the world is a lot bigger than he thinks it is, and after spending 4 years out in the world, experiencing their war and oppression, he makes the decision that still every single person outside of his home should die, never looking beneath the surface for why those issues plague the world, but instead deciding to burn the world down. He has been given godlike abilities and becomes more and more like Odin as time goes on, which I will elaborate on later. Through his future and passing abilities, he has the ability to change anything and everything that he wants to, but still elects to have his mom and dad die, as well as force his dad to kill an entire family, all in an effort to keep the control that he has. Control and power corrupt on all levels. Aaron, who was a child when first given ultimate control and is the least likely to be corrupted by it, has no hesitation and jumps headfirst into not only having that control, but using it in an effort to keep it as much as possible. Yes, in the end, Aaron does die and claims that it was all part of his plan. I don't buy it. I think that Aaron saw this plan was going up in flames and desperately was like, I was in control the whole time, because he desperately cannot relinquish the control that he needs. Control for Aaron means all-encompassing, complete and total power. Aaron cannot lose the little grip that he has on power, even if in his last moments. He needs to be admired, to be seen as larger than life. And even if all of his other friends have turned on him, he turns to Armin, kicking and screaming like a child, claiming that it was all in his plans anyway, and that all the hurt, pain, and death that he caused was because he is a hero. Armin, can't you see he's a hero? He can't die knowing that the whole world will hate him for his actions, so he makes Armin, admire him. Control for Aaron was not something that he was looking for in his life, but once he got it, he absolutely refused to let it go. He was going to hold on, even if it kills him, which it does. Even though it wasn't his choice in the first place, it is something that became central to his personhood and corrupted every single aspect of his life. While I do hate Makima, the element of choice is a big factor for me, and Aaron has the most choice over his actions than any other character, because birthright and prophecy are not things that are a factor for him at all. I mean, okay, yes, if you want to get granular, it's because, birthright, he has, access to the royal, Historia's birthright is important to him. But I don't really count that, whatever. So he has control over control with these abilities. Past, present, and future are all within his grasp, which is one reason why I can never see his motives as anything but selfish, because his goals and quests only ever benefit in his quest for power. Aaron says that he is doing this genocide quest for his friends. He wants to become the bigger evil to unite the world against him so that his friends have a better world to live in, which is a fucked up plan, but even if we saw that he really loved his friends, then okay. But I genuinely do not buy that Aaron gives a shit about his friends beyond the surface level. Even before he got his future sight, he was absolutely absorbed in himself. He is never really seen to be that concerned with John or Connie. Get the fuck out of here. Even Armin and Mikasa, he only ever kind of likes. Sasha dies, and he's just kind of there. The explanation is that Aaron is so meta at this point that he doesn't really feel human emotions in the same way, and that he realizes that his future sight kind of works. Okay, whatever. You're literally going to kill millions and choose to die for these bitches, and you can't give me anything? Yeah, okay. Aaron is both supposed to be deeply emotional and also too meta for emotion. I believe that Mikasa loves Aaron. I think that Armin cares about Aaron a lot. John, Connie, and Sasha are genuine friends to him. I'd like to point out that one of the stories that I think does, the kind of crazy genocide that you can justify with love is Castlevania. We don't see Dracula and his wife for very long, but when she dies, you certainly feel it, and you're like, man, maybe Dracula's right. Maybe all humanity deserves to die because they were really evil towards his wife. But yeah, okay, that's not important here. Okay, but does Aaron genuinely care about his friends? People cite Aaron asking Mikasa when they first get to Marley how she feels about him. I see people on Twitter being like, oh my god, he cares about her and Mikasa just needs to confess. Eren loves her. I literally do not see that at all. Sure, I guess that is what the show is telling us. Explicitly, Eren loves Mikasa, but I don't buy it. That conversation that people cite seems so clinical to me. Like, Eren really has no genuine idea why Mikasa keeps hanging out with him. If she told him that she loved him, I think he would just kind of nod and then understand why she hangs around and not do shit, like romantically. Because even though Eren is completely self absorbed the entire show, after he touches Historia's hand, he really is in his mind palace. I feel like I have been so negative towards Eren. However, I really do enjoy him as a character. I actually like him a lot. I think that what he contributes to the story makes a really cool twist on the guy becomes the monster he swore to destroy trope that started with Devilman, and has really been done a ton throughout Shonen. It's a genuinely cool twist that Eren, in his quest to get rid of monsters, becomes a different kind of monster, one that is far more destructive. He's worse than a Titan, he's human. If Eren touched Historia's hand and turned into the Control Devil, honestly, I would believe you. He is that clinical, cold, and detached from everything that is going on, and uses his powers of control to gain as much power as possible. I feel like Eren does actually become the Control Devil, though. He is that evil, with tiny bits of something else that are hidden deep within, and I genuinely think that is really interesting. I feel like Isayama wasn't confident enough in his storytelling to commit to Eren being truly evil. So he kind of fumbles the bag at the end by making Eren a hero, but I also think he doesn't go far enough that Eren isn't evil enough, and that wiggle room is where I can go crazy and say that Eren is actually fully evil. Makima is explicitly the villain, so that even through her death, even though her death is seen as triumphant for Genji, ultimately, even though it is baked in sadness and loneliness from both sides. If Eren was admittedly the Control Devil, not for real, but you know what I mean, then I think that would be really cool. The way that I see this as Eren's fall from grace is unfortunately me grasping at straws a little bit. This is the way that I enjoy the show, though most as well. So even though I actually really like Eren, I like my interpretation of him, which is a bit of a stretch for canon. Eren is a character that I think about all the time, which makes him good in some regard. I have a lot of complex feelings towards him, and this is basically working out my feelings towards him. I will note that I think that Makima's relationship to Denji is really interesting, given Nayuta in part 2, and I said I wouldn't spoil part 2, so if you know, you know. Okay, so looking at God of War. So God of War and God of War Ragnarok both have Odin as an important character. In God of War, Odin is never seen. However, as you move throughout the world, you hear stories of Odin through his ex-wife Freya and his former advisor Mimir. You hear about how Odin ordered Thor, his son, to kill all of the giants, which is the race of Jotunheim. You also see the scars throughout the realms that Odin's conquest and journey have left on the realm. Ragnarok is much more Odin-centric. He is an actual character that you see and also learn of his motivations. You learn that Odin seeks knowledge above all else. He seeks to stop Ragnarok from happening. Odin's flavor of control is just as all-consuming as it is for Eren and Makima. It eats up his entire life, motivating every decision, every feeling, every thought. His kind of control manifests itself in knowledge. He will hurt every single person who loves him in his quest for knowing as much as possible. He marries Freya under the guise of stopping the never-ending war between the Vanir and the Aesir. He played the long game with Freya, having a kid with her and slowly lowering her walls until she eventually taught him the Vanir magic. Once he learned this, all goodwill towards Freya ended. Odin's thirst for knowledge goes so far as him literally hanging himself so that he can know what death is like, as well as being able to gain knowledge of the other 9 realms. Odin's kind of control differs from Eren because it is entirely voluntary. While I argue that Eren's control is voluntary as well, I will give him the small break and say that he didn't choose to turn into a Titan in the very beginning, even if he could have done something about it later. Odin's choices and the fact that they are choices is ever present throughout Ragnarok. Atreus has become aware of the weight of the decisions of fathers during the last game, and has the benefit of being on the outside looking in when talking to Odin, Thor, and Sif, Thor's wife, and Thor's daughter Thrud's relationship. The weight of choice is something that is explored throughout Ragnarok, not making Odin a victim of fate or that it's or prophecy, unlike Attack on Titan. Throughout Kratos and Atreus' path towards doing things because they want to, and not because it is written, is contrasted with Odin, who is obsessed with prophecy, and then when there are changes, Odin kills those who change it. What I'm trying to get at is that Odin is 100% to blame for his own actions, and the story holds him accountable for that. Okay, so Odin kills the giants because he believes that he can prevent Ragnarok. Throughout the game, we learn that Odin kills the first giant and the first living being, who is a dude called Ymir. Ymir's dreams were incredibly powerful and prophetic, which is one reason why Odin killed him. Ymir's dreams are so powerful that he created a dream realm called the Ironwood Forest that is a sanctuary for giants that only giants can access. Atreus accesses his place in Ragnarok, and Attack on Titan's inspiration here is pretty obvious. Ymir in her dream realm that only Eldians of royal blood can access. However, when Eren is showed the history of his people, how they are mostly dead, and that the curse that led them there, he shoves it aside and devotes himself to committing genocide for these people. Atreus is shown the history of his people, how they are all dead, and that there's a way to honor them, maybe even bring some of them back, and he devotes himself to finding the loose giant souls that are scattered around the Nine Realms and tries to prevent genocide every step of the way. I say here that Eren is committing genocide kind of for the Eldian people, but again, I really don't think he is. This feels like a massively selfish decision. I would argue that, Zeke's plan is certainly not great, but you could make the argument that he's doing it for the benefit of everybody because, sterilizing an entire group of people is certainly not the most moral thing that you could do. But, he is trying to, in his own way, he thinks that's what's best for everybody. Whereas Eren, it doesn't even really think too much about that. He's just like, I'm going to kill everybody. And I think that is, I think there's no way to really make that selfless or a symptom of anything else, especially for him. Like, you could for Dracula in Castlevania, but not for Eren. Okay, so Odin, Eren, and Makima all equally and without exception choose control over their loved ones or the possibility of finding love in others. All for different core motivations, but the result is all the same, where control equals selfishness, obviously. I realize that this may not be a hot take for someone unfamiliar with how Attack on Titan is largely viewed and liked. However, I would get doxxed if I tweeted that first sentence in the right Eren apologist circles on Twitter. Especially since I equate Eren telling Armin at the end of the show that the genocide was for his friends to Light pathetically asking Ryuk for help at the end of Death Note in my head. Anyway, Odin, Eren, and Makima all have selfishness at the core of their desire for control, even if I don't 100% blame Makima for her being like that, despite me being able to blame her for her actions. This comparison is important to me because, personally, partially because of the media reception for Eren, and because I have a lot of thoughts about all these three in media. Okay, so my point of this presentation was to try to point out similarities between all these characters who are all different, as well as looking at what control looks like in different ways across characters that aren't typically tied to the concept. Obviously excluding Makima, who I try to use as a base so that when I talk about Odin and Eren, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Control may come from different places, but ultimately it leads all to the same place, somewhere dark, miserable, and more importantly, lonely. Loneliness to me is not something that will automatically make me sympathize with the character, especially when that loneliness is the consequence of their own actions. Ultimately, all these characters are punished for their quests for control, leading to catharsis on multiple levels for both the other characters in the stories as well as all the other characters. I do try to point out that the big difference is that Odin and Makima are the villains of the story, where Eren's role is more ambiguous, being both the protagonist and the antagonist. Eren is a character who I find deeply interesting, mostly for who he is, and again, the fan response ultimately lives rent-free in my head, unfortunately. People interpreting something that I like in a different way will always piss me off. Anyway, all these characters are really important to me, so I had to say something. I feel like they represent different places on the spectrum. I feel like, like Makima is kind of the extreme version of control. And then I think you have Eren, getting closer to her, and then Odin kind of a little bit more on the outside. Yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. Okay, thank you for listening. Yeah, fuck Aaron Yeager. This post was made by the Reiner gang. I love Reiner. I do like Aaron, but he also sucks. Okay, thank you.